Welcome to another episode of the Commodore 64 Compilation Comparison, and today's compilation review is 4 Great Games Volume 2. This was released in 1987 by MicroValue, and it's got a retail price, or it had a retail price, of £3.99, and unsurprisingly it contains 4 games. So let's take a look at them. Now before I look at this, you might be wondering, why am I not looking at 4 Great Games Volume 1? Well, I'm going to put a picture of that up on the screen now. When you see the 4 games that are included, basically 3 crappy looking sports games and a Bomb Jack clone, I think we can all agree they probably weren't 4 great games. So let's get on to looking at Volume 2, and it has to be said that this packaging is pretty average. So it says 4 Great Games in a big white text there. It says Volume 2 for less than £1 each, making a big thing about that, and it also got the $3.99 on the front there, the MicroValue logo, and then it's got the packaging covers for the original releases of these 4 games. So we've got Pyjamarama from Microgen, which is a really shoddy, blurry looking copy of the original cover artwork. We've got Phantom, we've got Top Duck, and we've got Frostbite. Moving on to the spine, again they're making a very big thing about the fact that it's just $3.99 for 4 great games. It also says 4 great games on 2 cassettes. Well, that's rare for a budget release. But also the way it's kind of all blurring into the background, this text on the spine is really poor. Blue text which you can barely read on the left hand side because of the fade of the colour in the background there, and it's really just quite shoddily presented. It's not a very nice looking spine. Moving on to the back, we've got descriptions of the 4 games, which are reasonably good, I suppose, and we've then got some screenshots which are very small and varying in quality. Again, this bottom one in particular is really blurry, very hard to make out what's going on there, but at least it has got some screenshots of the games and also some fairly detailed descriptions, so not too bad, I suppose. It also mentions at the bottom here that MicroValue is actually Tynesoft computer software. I think Tynesoft, MicroValue and Microgen were all basically the same company, and their games are included in this compilation. So moving inside, and firstly let's have a look at the tapes. As it said, you've got 2 cassettes for the game on each side. I like that. That's very rare for even a full price compilation, so I do applaud that. Nothing very great about the presentation of those tapes though, just a plain blue label with the names of the games on each one. So we've got Pyjamarama and Phantom on the one we just looked at, and Frostbite and Top Duck on the second one. Moving on to the instructions, they're reasonably good. The layout of them is a bit naff again. You've got this fold for the inlay there which goes through the middle of some of the instructions, but you've got fairly detailed instructions for each of the games. There's Pyjamarama, there's Phantom, it's got the keys and things like that. Top Duck, it's got a good overview of the game, and finally Frostbite as well. So the layout's a bit naff, but the actual content of the instructions is pretty decent. So with all that done, let's now take a look at these 4 games in this compilation. Given this is a budget compilation, I was quite surprised to find a full page advert for this in an issue of Zap64. It's not a particularly impressive looking advert, but it is surprising that MicroValue bothered to advertise it at all, because the competitors in this field such as Codemasters and Alternative Software rarely advertise their Quattro and Foremost compilations, although it should probably be mentioned that they came out several years after this one. The advert has a lot of blank space, but it does show the cover of the C64 version, and also lists a number of other versions for different systems, including some relatively obscure ones such as the Acorn Electron, MSX and Atari 8-bit, none of which tended to get much attention when it came to compilations by this point in time. What's interesting is each system seems to have a slightly different lineup of games, some of which definitely weren't originally published by MicroValue or their associated companies. The advert does say that the compilation follows on from the phenomenally successful first release with the quality and value of games better than ever, and based on what was on the first compilation, I think I can agree with that before even looking at these 4 games. Having said that, I am going to look at them, so let's kick things off with Pyjamarama, which was originally released by Microgen in 1984 and is the second of the Wally Week series of games. Wally's really in trouble this time. He's fallen asleep, and in his nightmare everything is enlarged to many times its normal size. To release himself from torment, he must find his alarm clock and wind it up. This, however, is nowhere near as simple as it seems, because many objects are needed to achieve different tasks which will become apparent as the game progresses. Only 2 objects can be carried at one time. To change an object you must pass over the one required and it will be exchanged automatically. There are many rooms in Wally's house and a wide variety of distractions to overcome. Keys will be required to open some doors, and to open others you just jump at the handle. Even though you're asleep, energy is also a factor in this game, and at the top of the screen you'll see a glass of milk containing snooze energy. This will begin to decrease as soon as the game starts and will also be drained if you're hit by an enemy. To replenish the lost energy, there are items of food in the house which will appear in different locations. When your snooze energies run out 3 times, effectively losing 3 lives, the game will be over and you'll have to start again. This is very clearly a straight port of the Spectrum version, with no enhancements to the graphics and sound aside from some music on the title screen. The graphics are nicely drawn though, with lots of character and variety and good animation. It has very simple controls, just left and right, and like a lot of these kind of games, it has an annoying jump mechanic that always sends you left or right rather than straight up. It's not quite as frustrating as the one in the Dizzy games though. You pick up, swap and use objects automatically, which does make things easier. These flick screen arcade adventures are not my usual kind of thing, but I did get into this one. I got a little further with each playthrough, each time discovering objects that allow you to pick up another one. For example, there's a library card that allows you to get a library book, and a pound that you can exchange for a penny in a change machine. Once you've got the penny, you can spend it in the bathroom and pick up a hammer, which allows you to smash some glass and pick up a fire extinguisher. As well as wandering around solving the puzzles, you can also take a respite from the adventure aspects and just play a variant of Space Invaders in one of the rooms, which was quite fun. There are lots of rooms to explore and plenty of respawning enemies to avoid, and it can be frustrating to lose health when they spawn on top of you. There are plenty of opportunities to top up health though, and no instant loss of life, so it's quite forgiving compared to some games in this genre. Pyjamarama does have some of the common faults of these flick screen adventures, and the puzzles are often quite obscure, but overall I'd say it's well designed and a good example of this type of game. It's not the sort of game I would have wanted to pay full price for, but for £1 on this compilation I'd say it offers good value. Next up is Phantom, which was originally released by Tynesoft in 1987. You play the role of a professor of astrophysics with an interest in psychic phenomena. You've been sent to investigate 4 buildings and to remove any evil that resides there. Each building contains ghosts, monsters and transporters, so with your experimental high-powered laser you must clear 4 floors of each building. Use of the laser decreases a gauge, but you can find fuel to keep it topped up, and as you explore each floor you'll find locked doors, so keys are needed to open them. Once you've cleared a floor you can use the stairs to take you to the next one. This is a game I played before on the BBC Micro, and I remember being very excited by the screenshots at the time it was released because it looks a lot like Gauntlet, which never got a B port. In reality it's not quite as exciting as that, though it definitely has some similarities along with an obvious Ghostbusters vibe too. The graphics for the ghosts are good and very obviously Gauntlet inspired, but otherwise it's quite bland, with every room basically looking the same. The status panel at the bottom of the screen is well done though, with lots of information and a clear layout. There are some odd colour choices for the C64, and I think the lack of variety in the colours does give away that this game originated on the BBC. One thing that definitely is better on the C64 is the music, and I like the fact you can adjust the volume of it, switching to sound effects when it's at its lowest level. The sound effects are very basic however. Unlike Gauntlet, this is a flick screen maze game where you must find a key on each screen to progress before eventually finding the stairs to the next level. You need to use the laser sparingly when possible, as if you run out of power you can get stuck in places unable to get past ghosts, which ultimately results in you dying. Recharge pods for the laser are sparse, so you'll soon learn that it's necessary to avoid ghosts when you can rather than shoot them. Your health is based on your heart rate, which is a pretty neat idea. It starts at 70 BPM and you die when it reaches 100, and you can sometimes get stuck next to a ghost or one spawns on you that runs up your heart rate very fast. You only have one life and there's no obvious way to lower your BPM, so unfortunately this can inevitably lead to death and limit your progress. Phantom does have some interesting ideas, but it's quite hard to make any headway and a little boring. You really needed more frequent power-ups or better level design to allow you to get past some enemies. More variety in the environment and hazards would also have helped make this a bit better than the average game it is as it stands. Let's move on to game number 3 then, and this is Top Duck, and this one's a little bit of a mystery because I can't find any information about exactly when this was released. It's on Lemon 64 but it doesn't have a release date there, and I can't find any evidence that it was actually released individually. There's no copies of it on eBay, there's no cover art available when you search on Google Images. I know it was released on a Commodore format Power Pack cover tape, but I think that was after this point in time, so I suspect this may have first been released on this compilation, but I can't confirm that. If you know different then let me know in the comments. As for the backstory for this one, Top Duck is the world's latest superhero and his extraordinary powers have brought him great fame and fortune. Unfortunately, this has brought him to the attention of Colonel Oliver Tovarich, right-hand man to the infamous Dr. Death. In his laboratory, Dr. Death wants to produce a strain of mutant ducks with superpowers to assist in his ambition to become a Hollywood screen star. Okay. Tovarich and his band of genetic mutant assistants, including rabid rats, strange-looking penguins, slimy snakes and more, have trapped the superhero in a disused multi-storey car park. The only weapon Top Duck has at his disposal is his super hard beak. Using this trusty weapon he's able to peck out large concrete blocks onto the heads of his attackers. You can peck out any of the blocks either to kill or slow down your attackers, and if you peck out all the blocks with eggs on, the giant egg at the top of the screen will flash and a 1000-point bonus is awarded if you can collect it before it stops. Pecking out the blocks with the lightning flash on will make that whole row of blocks fall. The presentation is very good in this game, with a title screen that has a decent SID tune, high score table and options for starting level, game speed and number of players. In game the graphics are a little crude, especially the player sprite which is just a single colour, though it is well animated. There are lots of different enemies with varying graphical quality, though most use multiple colours, and the backgrounds are simple but also colourful. The sound effects are reasonable and there are some nice little jingles at the start of most levels. Initially this is quite tricky and takes a few goes to get into, but once you do you'll find it's an excellent single screen puzzle platformer in a kind of Mr. Do's Castle or Space Panic vein, where you must eliminate all the enemies on a screen to progress. In order to make any real headway you must learn to slow enemies down by destroying blocks that they'll then temporarily fall into to allow you to get far enough ahead to drop blocks on them. The enemy AI is good and varies from one stage to another, with enemies having different behaviour and speeds. Yellow enemies are actually faster than you, so you should try to target them first. The puzzle element comes from working out the correct order to peck the egg blocks in order to unlock the 1000-point bonus without making it inaccessible. It's also worth noting that levels don't reset after you lose a life. This means there's less enemies, but you may have made it impossible to survive by removing vital blocks. Level 4 is exceptionally hard with its fast moving tanks and seems near impossible to complete without losing at least one life. I found that many of the levels after that are much easier. The ability to choose your starting level gives you the chance to practice later ones, while the speed options allow for increased difficulty, though it's still pretty hard even at the slowest setting. It lacks graphical polish and the controls can be a little twitchy getting on and off ladders, but once I got used to them I was playing this for ages. It's just my kind of game and seems to be a hidden gem as it got no reviews, which again suggests it may not ever have been released standalone. Rounding off this package of 4 games is Frostbite, which was originally released by Microgen in 1987. Deep within the caverns of the planet Cosmia, a lifetime struggle for freedom is being lost. Creatures from all over the planet are being captured by the ghoulish monster that inhabits it, and it's up to you to rescue them. You control a small tubular character that moves by turning end over end, called Hickey. Hickey is capable of using 3 objects to extend the range of movement during the game. These are small diamond-shaped sweets that Hickey can eat and come in 3 colours. Red ones allow you to move faster, blue ones allow you to jump higher, and green ones allow you to fall further. You can't use a sweet until you've picked it up and pressed the use button, after which the effect generated will last until you pick up and use another object. The monsters you encounter throughout the game are deadly and a life will be lost on contact with them. You have 5 lives to begin with and will be given chances during the game to gain extra ones. To get past some of these enemies you can pick up a weapon, and to increase your ammunition you can pick up various objects which can be found scattered around the caverns. At the bottom of the status display is a decreasing time limit. This is the time left before the captured creature on the level is eaten, and if this runs out the game's lost. I really like the graphics in this one as it has detailed backgrounds, a good variety of enemies and great animation on your Slinky-like character. They do look vaguely Spectrum-esque, but if they did originate on that system then it seems like they've been enhanced for the C64 version. There's also a good status bar with lots of info, decent in-game sound and a good tune on the title screen. This flick screen platformer has the basis of being a good game with some clever screen design, but it's ruined by an insane difficulty level. Your character's hard to get to grips with as it's tricky to master firing in the right direction and the movement you have to make after jumping. I lost literally dozens of lives and had multiple retries before even getting to the 3rd screen, with the droplets on the second one causing me some real issues as you need precise timing and pixel perfect precision for getting past them. Annoyingly, some enemies can be killed on one screen but not on others, and occasionally enemies can randomly respawn before the expected time, killing you off. Eventually I gave up trying to make progress with just 5 lives and used a trainer, but I still couldn't get much further as there are areas you get stuck in and it seems impossible to escape. This is one of those games you have to learn the ideal route through by trial and error, and you'll probably make progress a little bit at a time, but then it gets really tiresome playing through the earlier screens over and over. It's a real shame because this could have been a good and fairly original game, but the ridiculous and often unfair difficulty level sucks all the fun out of it. That rounds up my detailed look at the 4 games on this compilation, and that means it's time now to give the game some individual scores and of course give the compilation an overall rating. As always, I'll begin with the individual game ratings, starting with Pyjamarama, the oldest game in the pack and perhaps a little dated aesthetically by 1987, but it's a well-made arcade adventure game with some quirky puzzles and a fair difficulty level. At this price point it would compare well with similar games like the Dizzy series, so I'm giving it 7 out of 10. Moving on to Phantom, while Gauntlet crossed with Ghostbusters should have been a guaranteed winner, but the boring level layouts, repetitive gameplay and limited number of power-ups that impede your progress make for a fairly forgettable game. It's not terrible, but it's not much fun either, so I'm going to give it a score of 5. Top Duck was the big surprise in this compilation. It may be a little crude in the graphics department, but this single screen puzzle platformer was right up my alley gameplay wise. It's definitely challenging, but perseverance is rewarded, and it's also packed with options to give it more longevity. I'm giving it a score of 8 out of 10. And finally, Frostbite could have been a great game with some smart graphics and an interesting player character, but the tricky controls and brutal difficulty level make it an infuriating experience, and for that reason I'm giving it a score of 4. Moving on to the compilation rating, and the packaging was slapdash on the outside with some poor quality images, but the instructions are pretty detailed and it gets a bonus point for having each game on its own side of a cassette, which many full price compilations didn't do. Having said that, it's still only worth 6 out of 10. The average score for the 4 games comes out at 6 out of 10. In terms of value for money, well, if Top Duck wasn't exclusive to this compilation when it was released, then that pretty much makes it worth the $3.99 alone. There's another above average game in Pyjamarama, and even the 2 lesser ones offer plenty of playtime if you can be bothered with them, so overall this is a pretty solid package. With only 2 out of the 4 games being really worth it though, I'm going for a value for money score of 8. All of which means that the overall score for this compilation is 64%. It may not have looked like much, but this turned out to be quite a pleasant surprise, with Top Duck being a game I'll definitely play again. Finding a hidden gem like that was exactly the reason I started this series, so even though not all the games were great, I still really enjoyed looking at this one. It probably won't surprise you that there were no magazine reviews for this one, being a fairly low-key release, so let's now move straight on to my compilation league tables. And first let's look at the budget compilation rankings, and you can see that 4 Great Games Volume 2 has gone in at 2nd place with its score of 64%, just 1% lower than Codemasters Quattro Sports, and to be honest the games are probably a little bit better, but the packaging did let this one down a bit. Moving on to the rankings for all the compilations I've reviewed so far, you can see that 4 Great Games has gone in at 7th place. It's not troubling the top end of the table, but it's definitely one you should check out if you can pick it up for the right price. That brings another edition of the Commodore 64 Compilation Comparison to an end, and overall I was pretty happy with that one, but what did you think about it? If you've got any thoughts about this compilation and the games contained within it, then please leave a comment. I'd also appreciate you giving this video a like if you enjoyed it. My next compilation review is scheduled for just after Christmas, and that one has a particular significance to me. Between now and then there'll be plenty of other retro gaming content on this channel, so please stay tuned for that, and thanks very much for watching this video. Until the next time, see ya!